Once upon a time, there was a car called the Volkswagen New Passat. It came all the way from a factory in a land far, far away, but it couldn't find enough people to fall in love with it.
And the reason nobody loved it? It was ugly. It was so ugly, in fact, this was one Cinderella nobody wanted to take to the ball. It had the sort of face only a mother could love, and that meant very few friends indeed.
The problem was that the fairy godmothers at the Volkswagen factory had made a car without a smile, and without a radiator grille, the Passat found itself being left on the shelf.
Except, that is, in Belgium. The original Passat, launched in 1988, proved surprisingly popular with Flemish folk who ignored its lack of a friendly face in favour of its ample roominess.
Because room it had aplenty, being one of the largest cars in its class, longer than some Mercedes models.
The Belgians could appreciate what was on offer, but as far as Britain was concerned, forget it. All the cabin space in the world couldn't charm the buyers into parting with their cash.
Right, thought the Volkswagen fairy godmothers, time for a new spell.
They set to work, improving that faceless image. They gave Cinderella a smile.
Underneath, it was exactly the same car, but outside was the face of the new Passat.
But somehow it just wasn't enough, except in Belgium. So the fairy godmothers dusted off their book of spells, bought some fresh Eye of Newt and Wing of Bat, and tried again.
When the magic dust had settled, the new Passat appeared, a brand new re-engineered model with a range of features its ugly sisters could only dream of.
Gone with the boxy and inspiring looks of the Mark IV, replaced instead by smooth, curvy styling. The new vehicle has a completely new body shell, a new floor pan, new engine range, even a new interior. In fact, the only thing that remains to connect it with the Mark IV is the name, Passat. So why not change the name on this completely revised model?
There's always two arguments to this. If you start with the new name, not only do you have to get the name across, but then you have to show what profile that name is actually going to have, where that product's going to sit in the marketplace. It is our opinion that Passat has a good name over here. It has a very good name in Europe. Therefore, to change the profile of the vehicle is actually easier than trying to establish it and then change the profile. If you go back 4 or 5 years, the brand was very strong on golf. We saw 2 years ago we introduced new Polo. That gave us the second leg of the brand. So we were then playing with 2 large volumes in 2 different segments. Passat gives us the third leg, puts us into the upper medium segment, which puts the whole brand in a much stronger position where we have 3 cars now, all playing in different segments of the marketplace.
In terms of styling, Passat 5 bears very little resemblance to the boxy, masculine lines of its predecessor. This time around it's far sleeker, far more stylish and smooth. In fact, this rounded roof and rounded wheel arches, they've been taken from Concept 1, which is the name for the new Beetle. Now all this is for a reason. It's not just to look good, it's all about aerodynamics, or to be a bit more precise, something called the CD factor.
Yeah, CD for the Passat ranges from 0.27 for the small engined version, and at worst it's only 0.29 for the fastest Passat model with the largest engine. And CD is a measure of the vehicle's slipperiness. For example, if the CD of the Passat was 0.5, which would be very bad, it would require twice as much energy to push it through the atmosphere at a given speed and use twice as much fuel as if it was, say, 0.25. So it's a measure of how efficient a car is aerodynamically.
So really that's how you've been able to get these amazing fuel consumption figures, particularly on the TDI.
Well, the TDI is a highly efficient engine even by diesel standards. In fact, its thermodynamic efficiency is better than any other engine in a passenger car. And if you couple a very fuel efficient engine with a very slippery shape, you get some extraordinary performance and economy figures. For example, the 110 horsepower Passat will do 122 miles an hour, which is fast by any standards for a large car, and yet at 56 miles an hour it can return 76 miles to the gallon.
Hey, that looks good at the front, but come and take a look at this. How about that for size then, Blue Eyes? Oh, you could fit nearly all my holiday luggage in there. With a boot with that low capacity, it makes you wonder why they're bothering with the estate version, but I suppose somebody wants them. Another good thing about the Passat is the 60/40 split folding rear seats, which gives you even more versatility. And one great idea that they've come up with is locking rear seats. So they're going to stump those thieves that think it's an easy way to get into your goodies in the boot of the car. Whoa, just look at how tight and how smooth that join is. That's because of a revolutionary new welding technique.
I think when you look at the car, quite a few people have commented on how tight the bonnet shut lines are and the shut of the doors. And this is achieved by having a body side pressing, which is pressed all in one piece. So you have no joints on the pillars. Being one pressing, it comes from one piece of pressed tooling, which means you get very accurate geometry right around the door frames and on the whole side of the car. And of course you have a one-piece door frame pressing that's fitting into these apertures, so the doors fit into the frames extremely well with very tight fits. The structure of the new Passat is in fact 30% stiffer than the old one, and this comes from having fewer components. We also use a new laser welding technique, so laser beams give a very consistent, very thin, very strong weld, very quick, and lend themselves very well to modern production techniques. So several of these things that people notice actually come from very sophisticated production techniques.
Volkswagen have given us the TDI version for our test today. It's 110 brake horsepower with absolutely amazing diesel consumption, which means that it's probably going to be one of their best sellers. They're confident that the fleet buyers are going to go for it, and I can see why.
It's a more comfortable car than the old car. Because the position of the seat in the old car, I could never actually get it quite right. Whereas this one, obviously I haven't adapted the seat much already, but it feels fine straight away. The steering is definitely lighter. Whether that's due down to the tyre size on this vehicle to the old one, I don't know. That we'll obviously find out in the future. The quietness inside the car is remarkable.
For a diesel, isn't it?
For a diesel, it's so quiet. I was quite used to the old Passat TDI, and it was quite a noisy car inside the vehicle. But obviously we made a big effort on the sound improvement inside the vehicle, and it's very pleasing inside of it. You wouldn't be able to tell it's actually a diesel car. The engine's obviously a newer engine than the old Passat. The old Passat was 90 brake horsepower, whereas this is the 110. So you certainly feel that more responsive.
I think it's a nice shape. I think all cars are going very similar, but with the curves it makes it look a very special car. They went square at one stage. This looks very modern.
Yeah, criticisms of the Passat last time round were this sort of horrible boxy, very uninspiring style. And do you think VW have got it right this time?
I think they've got it totally right. I think it's an exciting car to look at, an exciting car to drive, superb car.
Well, you're the people that do need to be excited by it, because they're expecting you to go from 8,000 sales this year to 30-odd thousand next year. Can you do it?
I think we certainly can. I think our market will change. I think we'll be looking at the fleet market next year, where we've been out of that market for a long time. We didn't have a car to show the fleet buyer. This car is going to answer all those questions.
Chris, will it be just the fleet buyer, do you think?
I think the greatest percentage of sales will come from fleet, but there'll be one or two people who want to perhaps run a bigger car for children, 5 people in the car. They'll be attracted to the car, but our greatest percentage of sales will come from the fleet.
How are you going to get rid of the Mark IVs? What are you going to do? Because with this around, people are going to want to go for it. Big discounting?
No, I think it's been an organised sellout of the cars. There's been very few left now, so it's not going to be mad rush how we're going to get out of these cars. It's been very well organised. We're all left with very few left now.
Now, you're also an Audi dealer here. Are you quaking in your boots a little bit because of the fact that it is so like the A4, but £3,000 less?
And bigger, and bigger. It's going to be a big competitor for Audi A4. Galvanised body, ABS as standard, yeah.
Yes, there will be some waiting, but to a certain extent, some waiting is not a bad thing. It means that the car can then be built to the customer's order rather than the customer wanting a red one but have to take a green one and they're not actually 100% happy. It's better to build the car to the customer specification, and then they're much happier, and they're much happier with us and the dealer as well.
The outside of the car may look good, but it's once you actually take a look inside that you realise how much this has moved on from the Mark IV. Volkswagen seem to have realised that desirability of a car doesn't really depend on basics like economy or fuel consumption. It's attention to detail that makes it stand out from the rest. Just take a look at the detail that's in the new Passat. It's incredible. There are that many extras, I'm going to have to read you the list. Okay, let's start with vanity mirrors on both sun visors are illuminated from roof-mounted lights, none of that glaring in your eyes. You know how when you're in the car on a sunny day and you get both the sun visors down, driver and passenger, and there's still that annoying bit in the middle that the sun gets through? Well, not anymore, because in the Passat, a third sun visor fills the gap between the driver and passenger visors. And just to prove to you how important VW think class is with this car, what a lovely fade out. This model has full air conditioning, even, would you believe, in the glove box. Perfect for keeping your chocolates cold. Now, one thing that Volkswagen have put a lot of research into and spent a lot of money on is cup holder technology. This elegantly designed dual can system slides out, forming a semicircle around the gear lever. Now, the SE, the Sport and the V6 models have an additional pair for the rear seat passengers too, just so they don't feel left out. Now, Volkswagen really have taken this class thing to the extreme. Look at that, no flicking back, a nice smooth movement. And take a look at the ashtray. Damped and very slick. The smooth curving lines of this well-appointed and extremely clear and user-friendly dashboard are set off by this 3-spoke steering wheel. But you know, I can't help thinking it should have an Audi badge in the middle.
The great mystery is how on earth this car can have the features and the feel of many executive cars, yet have a starting price of just under £14,000.
It's what we call the effect that Dr. Lopez has had on purchasing back in Wolfsburg, where they've managed to bring down their purchase costs and actual build costs of cars. It's also this idea of now using common components right through all 4 brands that are owned by Volkswagen. It doesn't mean that the brands are the same. It's using a library of parts, and each engineering team create their own car from those library of parts, i.e. gearboxes, engines, floor pans, etc. And this again helps to bring costs down. And Volkswagen in Germany sees that there is a big potential in the UK market, and they see that there is a big potential within the fleet market. So here we have a vehicle that has to compete with its competitors.
What about service and parts, which is traditionally where VW have failed? It's you're perceived as being expensive after service.
We again can show where now that we have our parts in line with competitors, and if you take old Passat versus new Passat, parts prices on a basket of parts has fallen by 33%, which I think shows that we are now serious on getting our parts prices right.
This car certainly does have power and an awful lot of refinement, but for the real speed freaks amongst you, you can look forward to getting behind the wheel of the V6. 2.8 litre, 30 valve with permanent 4-wheel drive, which will be hitting the streets next spring. A big Passat criticism in the past was the gears. They were really notchy and quite difficult to get in. Well, that's not the case this time. They're absolutely smooth as anything. One feature that's available on the Passats is an optional extra at around £1,500 if you're feeling like you really want to splash out, is a great navigation system. Now, we saw something like it a couple of weeks ago when we did the NEC special in the new Ford Mondeo. The great thing about this one though is that whereas the Ford Mondeo's panel was situated down near the gears, which you had to look down to all the time, on the Passat it's right in front of you on this fabulous little dashboard. And you can get your directions just from looking straight ahead. So let's give it a go. I don't know Newcastle that well. I'm getting a bit lost. Let's see if it works.
Your position is located outside of the digitized road network.
Well, that's typical. They haven't mapped Newcastle yet, which hopefully should be addressed by the end of next year for those people that are interested. Have you wondered why it's that rather authoritarian female voice? It sounds like a school teacher or a nanny, doesn't it? I mean, I know some of you out there would rather have a breathy young female saying, go straight ahead and don't stop, but somehow I think it might take your mind off your driving. In this report, you've heard an awful lot of positive things about the new Passat. In fact, the industry in general has been startled by the innovations of this Mark V car and the realisation that VW seems to have got it right at last. But you know, we're an impartial, independent programme and we have to bring you the downside. Now, I've been chatting to some of the hardened hacks here at this press launch. They've been driving cars for years. One thing that everyone seems to agree on: the steering wheel. The badge, it's just too shiny.
The old Volkswagen Passat was never a huge hit in Britain, but of the numbers that were sold, it was the Estate that most buyers went for. The trusty, reliable, good old workhorse. But the coming of the new Passat Saloon has changed things just a bit. VW can't make them fast enough, and queues to own one are longer than traffic jams on the M25. And what of the trusty Estate? When it finally arrives, will it have changed from workhorse to true thoroughbred? Well, we've been invited to Hamburg in Germany to the press launch to find out.
And here is the familiar front of the Passat that we know and we love. But of course, it's the back end that we've all come to Germany to see. So follow me and take a first look. So what do you think? Has it lived up to your expectations? Well, I think it looks great, but you need to take a closer look and make up your own minds.
The old Passat Estate, it wasn't a huge hit in Britain, but the numbers that were sold, by far more of the Estate were sold than the Saloon. So why has it taken so long for the Estate to arrive this time?
I think if you look in the normal introduction of product, the Estate has really followed very quickly behind the Saloon. Traditionally in the past we had to wait about a year for new model variants to come through, and in fact we have deliberately delayed the introduction into the UK. We could have had it in July, but we have so many outstanding orders for Saloon, we've decided to put it back to October, to the motor show, so that we can fulfil the Saloon orders more readily.
Yeah, the Passat does have a very high level of spec, really. So what about the Estate, the variant? Will that have this similar high level to the Saloon version?
Yes, again, they'll mirror exactly the specifications of the Saloons, and as I say, that, as you well know, that the Passat is we think, remarkable in offering luxury Mercedes-Benz type standards of quality at the normal price for that sort of vehicle. It's sort of Mondeo Vectra pricing.
Even the entry-level model on the Estate has an extremely high level of specification. It says in the press pack, to drive a new Passat is to lack nothing, and I have to say that we tend to agree with that. Included is a list as long as your arm, and I'll give you some examples from it. ABS, front and side airbags for both driver and passenger. Seatbelt pretensioners in both the front and the rear. Roof rails, extremely useful on an Estate car. A load area cover. Central locking, and that includes the rear tailgate. Electrically heated remote controlled outside mirrors, electric front windows, a steering wheel column that's adjustable for both height and reach, a fuel filler flap that has a remote release, rear head restraints, and a centre rear armrest. And of course, rest assured, there are 2 cup holders in there as well.
Of course, this is the bit on an Estate car that everybody's interested in. And this time around, the all-new Passat Estate certainly has far more luggage capacity. If it means anything to you, it's up by 30 litres to a vast 495 litres. But what there are a couple of really nice touches that make it just that bit easier to store things. There's a great pull-out luggage cover, good for safety, and also some handy little clips all around the back here that mean you can tie up those bulky items and keep them down. All in all, it makes a very practical and vast luggage area, which is what you're buying an Estate car for, isn't it? But it's once you get inside that you realise just how spacious it actually is. You see, the VW Passat has been eating its greens. It's grown all over. It's grown 8 centimetres in length, 2.5 centimetres in width and 5 centimetres in height. And that extra height and the fact that the Estate version has a flat roof instead of the curved version of the saloon gives rear passengers plenty of headroom, which is really quite needed. It also has more legroom for rear seat passengers than any other vehicle in its class.
I've noticed from looking through the press details that the automatic version comes with an intelligent system that actually learns your driving behaviour. Can you explain this?
Yes, it is an adaptive system, and for example, automatic gearboxes will change up and down at predetermined points. And if a driver is driving gently, so on a light throttle, the gear change will generally, the car will change up early. You can always get maximum performance when you put your foot flat on the floor, but it adapts to different driving styles. So if you're a sporty driver, it will gradually learn the fact that you're applying a lot of acceleration and adapt the change points accordingly.
Throughout the cabin in general, everything is extremely well laid out, and the whole feeling is really one of extreme quality, almost luxury, that you'd really expect to find in a car of a different class. As VW say, it's all about attention to detail. I think one could almost call it an obsession.
Well, there's certainly a feel of solid quality. It has that indefinable something that we've come to expect from German cars.
The foot controls are light. The gear shift isn't, but it is solid and sure. My only niggle inside the car is having to flip up the armrest to operate the handbrake comfortably. The new Passat's up against tough competition in its class and against its own ugly sister reputation, but I think this is one sad fairy tale that should have a happy ending.